What am I saying again?
This is MPW,
MPW.
the podcast
with your host, Xylo Aria.
Cool.
A podcast about music production
For the everyday musician.
where we learn from experienced studio engineers and each other.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the MPW podcast. I'm your host, Xylo Aria, and today we are here to chat to the lovely Danny Greet. So Danny is a vocalist, an instrumentalist, a producer, a mixer, and also a product manager at Yamaha. So great to have you here with us today, Danny. How's your morning going?
It's going great, thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
No worries. We will chat about studio monitors, which is something that you are an expert in, and I'm keen to get into some of that with you. But before I do, I would like to hear a bit more about, your career in music and how you got to where you are today and the journey that's kind of happened on the way.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I was, I think from an early age, I was always attracted to wanting to play a musical instrument. I think the saxophone. I never got around to playing the saxophone.
Okay.
I don't know why. I ended up playing guitar like everybody else. But I took lessons and started to realise that you can actually play songs by other people, which is a great feeling. And then before you know it, you're writing your own songs. I was playing it, I'm talking like when I was in my teens, like jamming with friends. You start sort of playing with bands. And then, this was in the sort of late 90s. So it wasn't, not necessarily, you could have a studio set up, but it not like you can today. So it was very much, I remember I had a Tascam Porter studio. That was my first sort of introduction to the recording world, which was really good. So I was the guy that would be sort of with this little box and tape machine going recording what we'd done with friends and things like that. And I really enjoyed it. And I thought, this is something that I think I can do. So I went off to university to study music technology, and then moved to London, and I was lucky enough to assist in a few studios. I was a runner in a post-production place for a while, played in a few bands, and went from there to doing freelance work for people. So people would send me mixes to do, remixes to do. Even when I was at uni, the studio was free at weekends and at holidays. So I'd go out and tell people and say, hey, look, do you want to record? I can record you, and just grab them just to get that experience, which was great. And then fortunate enough to be in some pretty decent bands where we were able to tour the UK and found ourselves recording some decent stuff in some good studios back home. Fortunate enough to be a session muso with a few acts. Again, mainly touring around the UK, but that was a really great experience. And on a side note, just for gigs, people will get me to do live sound and stuff like that occasionally. I'm not the biggest sort of advocate for live sound from my point of view. I prefer the studio stuff. It's a little bit more creative, and you've got less pressure to perform under a shorter period of time. I suppose people will argue differently, but for me, that's the way I feel. And I've always sort of, worked in music on the side as well. I was fortunate enough to move to Australia. I was working for the orchestra, and then found myself moving to Melbourne with my wife. And I was working as a freelance sound tech, and managed to get a job at Yamaha, working part-time in sales, and just work my way up accordingly. So it's been a pretty random kind of progression, but lots of fingers in different pies. But it's been a real good one.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear people's journeys, and they're always so varied, I guess. And so it's good, I think, to know that that you kind of end up somewhere that you enjoy, no matter what path gets you there. So
100%, yeah. And it's just about that. Just keep going. Just keep at it, and just try all different things. Don't close yourself away and just do one thing. Just keep yourself open, and that'll only increase your skill set as well.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Thank you for sharing that with us.
That's right.
And so I guess going to our topic, which is studio monitors, the first thing that I might get you to do is define what they are in one sentence. And it might seem a bit basic for some people, but, I know that sometimes people, when you hear the word monitors, you might think of a screen. rather
Yeah,
than
yeah.
what we're talking about. So could you give us a one sentence definition?
Yes, I'd say studio monitors are a loudspeaker that's been specifically designed for a studio, for playback of sound in a studio environment that represents a true representation of a particular sound.
Oh, that was very good.
No.
Thank you. Yeah, sometimes people struggle with that one, but I think you covered all the main bits there in a sentence.
It's a good question. I like that one. It is a good question. You could go on often different tangents and different ways to how to describe it.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So now that we know what they are, one thing that people can, think about when they're first thinking about potentially getting studio monitors, they might be like, oh, I already have some hi-fi type speakers at home. Why can't I just use that, and why would I need a set of studio monitors?
It's a great argument in that one. And, I definitely in the past for myself, I've made the mistake of just thinking hi-fi monitors could do the job, hi-fi speakers, sorry. But, the thing is, at the end of the day, a studio monitor is designed specifically for audio playback in the studio. Okay. So that's designed in a way to just play the truest frequencies without anything being coloured. Now, what I mean by that is, as opposed to a hi-fi speaker, they're designed for just your regular listener at home. You might be sitting on the couch, want to put some tunes on, and you want that to come across. You want it to sound good. So a hi-fi speaker has been particularly, you could say, tuned, EQ'd to make playback sound good, where a studio monitor isn't. It's not that studio monitors sound bad, they just sound true. You're getting a true representation of the sound, and you need that to work with your recording. So if you were mixing on a hi-fi speaker, you're not going to get a fair, your mix is not going to sound good because you're getting an unfair bias in your ears from what you're hearing. And, you might add frequencies that don't need to be added, or you might cut things that don't need to be added, where with a studio monitor, what you hear is what you get.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a really good way to put it, I guess. You can't know what to do with whatever it is that you're working on if you don't know the starting point or the true starting point.
That's correct. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's very useful. So then looking at the different types of studio monitors. So you might get, I've seen active and passive ones when I first went to the shop, and I didn't know which one I needed. So what is the difference between the two, and why would you choose one over the other?
They've both got their own applications. So an active speaker is basically a self-contained loudspeaker that's, you've got the bare components of a driver, a woofer, and a tweeter. So you've got the sort of the large and the smaller cone that you see on the front of monitors, but inside that as well, it's got an amplifier. So that you just send your music source. It amplifies in one box. It's a speaker, everything in one box. Whereas a passive speaker, that's just a speaker on its own, just with the two cones, and you need a power amp to power those speakers. Now, different applications. I mean, there's no, look, there could be slight arguments of what sounds better, but really, I wouldn't say there is anything that sounds better than another one, active or passive. It all depends on what you've got, what space you've got to work with. Active speakers are great for smaller spaces. Perfect for home studio setups. You've just got, at the end of the day, you've just got two speakers to work with. You don't need to worry about certain cables. You don't need to worry about a particular power amp or which one what to choose. It's kind of all done for you there. However, with passive speakers, they allow for a larger speaker, so you might, with the passive speakers, they might work better in a larger studio environment or in a live environment, perhaps, where you can have a larger speaker where you've got room for it. And they allow, I suppose, it's a larger speaker, it's going to have a larger frequency range as well. So two different applications, but it doesn't make a lot of difference in terms of sound quality. It's all about what you need to do with your particular where you're going to place them.
Okay, yep, that's good to know. So maybe if you're starting out, then maybe the active might be the way to go. And also,
I think so these days.
Yeah. And just on the passive one, so if you were to get a set of passive speakers, if you have the right space for it and all that kind of thing, does the amp usually come with the speakers, or is that something that you have to buy separately?
Yeah, like that would be something you'd need to buy separately. So again, there's another bit of research, a little bit more work to do to discover or find out if that's the right particular speaker for yourself.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that amp can work with those speakers, and that can be slightly a little bit more technical in terms of ohms and things like that. But when you go out shopping for whatever speaker or student monitor or after, speak to guys in stores. They'll put you right. But yes, you would need to pay a little bit more attention to what amp you're considering.
Okay. Yep. No, that's good to know. So maybe starting with the active, and then if you want to go down the passive route, then maybe get some advice from the people in the stores. So that's...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's some great passive speakers out there, but again, just speak to people, just find out what's going to work for yourself and the space that you've got to work with.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then when you are talking about types of speakers, you also hear like other types, maybe near field or far field and that kind of thing. So what types are there? And I don't know if I've covered them all, but when would you go for each one?
So basically near field and far field they basically say what they do. And near field speaker is something you have close to you. So that might be a smaller speaker with a smaller cone, say 3, 4, 5-inch speaker. They're perfect for your studio, home studio, maybe a bedroom environment, stuff where you've not got quite a lot of space. Far field speaker is a larger speaker. So that might be something up to, some studios have great big like Channel X mounted and things like that. So they're great for larger spaces. If you're playing back at high volumes, so if you're mixing a track that's going to be played back for a nightclub or something like that, far field speakers are going to be a great way to sort of reference your sound. There's also speakers, there's ported, unported and ported speakers. So a ported speaker is basically you'll see some monitors with a hole in it, so that's ported. That allows for more frequency response in the bass, in the lower end, whereas a closed, unported speaker would that basically works the woofer more and allows for a little bit more clarity over the sound.
Okay, so is there, or when would you go for the ported over the unported, especially if you were in like maybe a home studio environment?
Yeah. I think for a home studio environment, you'd really want to go for something that's, I think best. I'd say unported for a home studio. You might have your speakers, you might be close to a wall. Some monitors have their ports at the back. So they'll be pushing bass frequencies out of the back. And if you're in a corner or in a wall, that could be going all over the place. So yeah, unported are really good for home studio setups, and especially for smaller setups as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's good to know. And you mentioned earlier on like the different parts of the speaker. So you mentioned the tweeter, the woofer, and the driver. So
yeah,
can you just talk about what they are when you're looking at a speaker?
Yeah, so I mean, look, you can think of a speaker as a rectangle, just the face of it. The tweeter's at the top, so that's mainly responsible for your high frequency end of the spectrum. The woofer is at the bottom, so that represents the lower end of the spectrum. So those two combined together, they give you the spectrum of sound that they output. And the driver is basically without getting too technical, it's a great big magnet with a coil in it that moves, that creates the sound that you hear. Cool. So, I mean, drivers can be all shapes and sizes depending on the size and the output of the speaker. Okay,
cool. No, that's good to know. All right, so we've gone through a few different types and gotten a bit more clear about what we're maybe looking for. And say we are going to the shop and we've kind of understood a little bit about what types of monitors there are. What things do we need to think about when we're going to look for our first pair of monitors?
Yeah, 100%. I'd say do it, apart from do a little bit of research online, do what look at what say if you okay, for instance, Billie Eilish recorded in a home studio on a pair of HS5s. If you're into that kind of music, that'd be a good way to start. That'd be thinking about who uses what. Then think about your budget. So if you've got X amount to spend, try and sort of whittle it down to a couple of speakers, from your research online, whittle it down to a couple of speakers that you might be interested for your budget. Now, that might be something that, again, it could be near field, it could be different sizes, it could be active, it could be passive, but just try and whittle it down to something that you think that might work for you. Then go into a shop, listen to them. You've got to listen to them with your own ears. I mean, you can look at YouTube videos and things like that, but you can't trust the sound of a speaker for a YouTube video because there's too many things going on before it reaches your ear. So consider price, consider what might work for you in terms of what music you're into. Consider your space. Now, obviously, you don't want to go and buy huge speakers if you've only got a small space, because that'll come into effect when you try and mix. And yeah, just have a listen. That's the best way to do it. Any store out there will be more than willing to set up a few speakers for anybody to have a listen to. Take some tracks that you've mixed, take something that, a reference track that inspires you, and listen to it on different speakers, and just try and sort of think that, does one sound a little bit more bassier than the other one? Is this one a little bit more clearer? But you'll know.
Okay. And is there some sort of rule of thumb of like size of the speaker to the space that you have in the room, or are there any resources that you might recommend to work out how big a speaker is big enough for your room? I
think for myself, don't just be careful in terms of size. If you've got a small space, don't get big speakers, because you're just gonna you're not going to get a fair representation of the sound. And what I mean by that is like a larger speaker is going to throw out more frequencies, and if you're in a smaller room, those frequencies are just going to be bouncing all over the place. You might hear too much bass, and your mixers are going to be way off. Smaller studio monitors are going to work a lot better in that terms, because it's going to be the sound's going to be a lot tighter. You're not going to be throwing sound all over the place, so you're going to get something that you can trust. Okay,
yeah, that's good to know. So I guess what you're saying is bigger is definitely not always better, and maybe potentially the opposite.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a fine line. I mean, you might think, wow, I need the biggest speakers out there, and who knows, you might get them home and you might be able to magically sort of be in tune to those speakers and do an amazing mix. I doubt it very much, but yeah, big is not always better. Definitely not.
Okay. That's good to know. And then, I mean, thinking about as well, once you've purchased your favorite pair of speakers and you're very excited to kind of get them and ready to use, what would you say, how would you go about placement? There's people get stands, some people just put it on their desk, and also where in the room. What would you recommend on that?
There's a couple of things to consider. Look, stands are probably the best way to go. I mean, you can put your speakers on your desk. There's nothing to stop you. Put your speakers on your desk if you want, but how high is your desk? Your desk could be sort of desk height. You don't want your speakers desk height. You need them to your ears. So stands perfect. You're going to get some stands, put them either side of where you're working. The speaker's going to be at ear level, and that's where you need it to be. Placement wise, I mean, look, you want to make sure I'm sort of zooming back because I'm looking at my speakers, but you want to make sure that if your desk is central, you want your speakers at an equal distance either side to where you're sitting, and you want those pointing into your ears. So you form so what you're doing basically, you're just forming a triangle, and that way you're not going to sort of encroach in phasing and things like that. It's one frequency from one speaker's not going to mix with another one and affect what you're hearing and stuff like that. So kind of like an equal triangle. You don't want them next to any wall or any corner. So just slightly off the wall, slightly in from a corner if you've got the space. is ideal. But I mean, look, like I say, these days you can get stands for desks, and look, it might work. But then, if you've got a speaker on a desk and you're going to be playing a lot of low frequencies, that sound's going to be reverberating around your equipment, and again, that could affect your mixes and things like that. So with stands, that's really good because sound then is dissipated away through the speaker and into the floor and things like that. So it's not really going to affect too much of the sound that's being played back to you.
Okay, yeah, cool. And then one thing that you mentioned there about things or your speaker being at the ear level. So which part of the speaker would you want to be at the ear level?
Yeah, that's a real good one actually, because people will just think, oh, they'll just look at the speaker and go, I just need to be sort of in line with the woofer, which is kind of wrong. You need to sort of be it. Sort of, where the tweeter is on the speaker, try and get your ears sort of in line with that. Doesn't look, sometimes you don't have to be exact, but it would be better if you've got to that kind of level, because then you're getting a fair representation of the sound. You're not getting too much bass or too much highs on that one. But yeah, that's definitely a way forward.
Okay, yeah, no, that's good to know. I actually made my own little stands for mine using the foam in the box. Just cut it in half, and it's actually perfect height. Painted the boxes, and I love it.
That's brilliant. And that is the beauty of doing home recording and making it work. There's always a way, is what I'm trying to say. There's always a way.
For sure. Okay, cool. Then kind of going on to if we have our set of speakers and they're kind of in the right spot, sometimes you see people with like multiple sets of monitors. Why would you get that, and what's the benefit?
Yeah, it's a real good one, that one. And it's always something that anybody that mixes anything in the studio, it's always good to play them on different speakers. Why? Because people are going to be listening to them. People aren't going to have studio monitors in their house to listen to. Some people might, but they're not going to have studio monitors in the house. So you need to play on different speakers to hear what it's going to sound like on diff. So you might see some studios will have large monitors, then they'll have some near field smaller stuff that's, you might even see something like a $50 pair of PC speakers, which are great. Mix on them, not necessarily mix on them, but reference to them, check them, play it back on your phone, play it back on a Bluetooth speaker. And that's why people have different speakers in their studio. So they want to hear what it sounds like, or it's going to sound like on different speakers. It might even have a pair of hi-fi speakers in the studio to hear what it would sound like on in a just a general playback in a home. So yeah, it's good. It's definitely worth playing back on a few different speakers. And yeah, even if you're just playing back through one speaker, playing back through doing a mono mix through one speaker can help a lot as well.
Okay, that's good to know. And also, I mean, from what you're saying as well, just to clarify for some people, when you see multiple sets of speakers, you're not expecting them all to be on at the same time. You'd kind of switch between pairs. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. And these days you can get interfaces or controllers that can easily switch, or some interfaces will have several outputs and things like that. So yeah, they're not on all the time. It's just a case, sometimes you just might be switching and listening to a couple of seconds, just to sort of go, okay, yep, sounds like that in there, go back to the main speakers, and we need to do a bit of a tweak. And
then looking at the differences in speakers as things get expensive, so what exactly are you paying for with the added cost of the speakers?
Yeah, it's something as simple as, like, a smaller speaker requires less resources than a larger speaker in terms of the type of, there's more materials going to a larger speaker, hence there's going to be more costs. Along with that one, you're going to get more expensive speakers because there's going to be a lot more R&D, research and design that's gone into them. There's going to be higher class of components that have gone into them, and again, you might just be paying for a brand name as well on top of that. So you pay for what you get with music gear. You don't need to spend a lot of cash, because sometimes there's monitors that can go for thousands and thousands of dollars, but you don't need to spend thousands of dollars. But yeah, you're just paying for more materials and better components, really.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's helpful. And then looking at potentially adding a subwoofer. So when would you think about doing that, and what's a good setup there, or space that where you might think about doing that?
Subwoofers are come in really handy. So say if you've got yourself, so you've gone out, you've bought yourself your first set of monitors. They're not huge. They're sort of, I don't know, could be anything from a 5 to 7 or 8, even an 8-inch cone. You're mixing some tracks, and you sort of, you're probably losing some low end, or you're cutting some low end, perhaps. A subwoofer would be perfect in that kind of environment to bring in, so you can hear that low end, so you can feel that low end, you can hear what's happening. It saves you from sort of going out and saying, you're happy with the monitors you've got, you want to get some low end to it. You don't want to have to go and sell your monitors and buy new ones. You're happy with the ones you've bought. Great addition to your studio for that kind of thing. Also, if you're mixing stuff that's bass heavy, so if you're mixing at home with a couple of 5-inch cones and you're just doing some acoustic stuff, fine. If you're mixing at home and you're using some smaller speakers, but a lot of your work's going to be electronic music or hip hop or something that's bass heavy, a subwoofer is a great addition there, because you're gonna be, those frequencies are very important to that sort of music. So you want to know what's going on down there. So a subwoofer is a great addition in that sense. Also, if you're doing sound design for games or film, or if you're doing soundtrack for film, subwoofer's a great addition, because that music's going to be played back in a cinema. It's going to be played back on people's, larger systems. So yeah, it's definitely worth considering a subwoofer. It's not essential, but just if you feel that you need that, like I say, if you're mixing that kind of music for that certain environment, it's definitely a route to go down.
And is it fine to use a subwoofer, like, no matter what room size you have? Like, could you find a subwoofer to fit every room, or is it, if you have a small room, maybe it's not worth getting it?
I don't know, really. I mean, if you've got a small room, it's not necessarily essential. But I mean, I on the flip side, why not? Why not get one in there? Because I don't think there's any right or wrong way of doing it in that terms. But obviously, you don't want to get invest loads of money into a great big massive subwoofer if you've only got a small room. I mean, those things, basically, size of a subwoofer is going to. If you're mixing in a larger room and you're doing that kind of music, then yes, you'd probably need a larger subwoofer. But yeah.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like it's good to have one if you can manage it.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool. And then kind of looking at the actual room that you're playing your music in, how important is it to have that room treated? And do you have any advice on where to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, treatment is a massive subject all on its own. It can go as far as just putting a bit of foam up or to, acoustic design. No, any treatment is good treatment. So if you were to sort of go online, have an investigate into what might work for you, what might work for your space. But I'd kick off with sort of treating the area of where you're working. So if you can get something as simple as you can get the Oralex foam and things like that to start you off. It can be quite reasonably priced. You can spend absolutely thousands on it, but if you can get some basic treatment either side of your monitors, and something that in front of where you're working, on the front of where you're working, is great, because that way the sound is not going to be bouncing off the walls where you're working. You're just going to get some bounce, but the majority of it's going to be coming from your speakers. Then if you're working towards sort of some corners, you might want to think about some bass traps in those corners. And again, bass traps are probably a really good way to start. If you can get those into the corners of your room, you'll notice a difference straight away. I've just moved to this house, so I haven't treated it yet for where I'm working. I just haven't got around to it. So yeah, I'll be certainly working on that over the next few months. But yeah, just remember, any sort of treatment is good treatment, and it's worth just spending a little bit of cash. You could spend anything from a couple of $100, or you can go mad with it. But yeah, it's definitely worth considering.
And then the final question, what is your recommendation of the best studio monitors for someone to start with?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would without mentioning, sort of going deep into what sort of brands, get something that, do your research online, because that's the that's the first port of call. Go into a shop and listen to them. Maybe don't get something too massive. Don't get something too small. Get the right kind of size. So you want something with sort of a 5-inch cone is a great way to start. Up to about an 8-inch should be perfect. Look at your brands. Yamaha, obviously, slightly biased because obviously I worked for Yamaha, but they make a great HS5. It's a brilliant way to start. You've got other companies. Behringer make a really good entry level one, Behringer Truth. You've got Tannoy do the reveals. KRK. There's lots of really good monitors out there on the market to get you started, but obviously buy a Yamaha HS5. But no, seriously, yeah, just don't go too crazy with cash, but yeah, just have a look. Don't get nothing too big.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I actually, when I went to get my pair of monitors, I kind of had an idea, and I think I decided on a particular pair, and then I'd gone to the shop and then had, was listening through a couple of different pairs of speakers, and then I couldn't go past the HS7s myself. So I bought them and I absolutely love them. So definitely a fan of the HS series.
That's really good to hear. Great news.
Yeah.
Indeed. C7s are really good actually because they fall in the middle. They're not small, they're not massive, but they've just got that perfect. I think they're the perfect speaker to start with. To be honest, they're really good. The frequencies that and look, everything about them's great.
Yeah. So I'd probably say that they'd been my favorite from the ones that I'd listened to anyway.
Great. Did you get the white pair?
No, I didn't. I just got the black pair.
I love the white. The white ones looks like they look futuristic, like from a spaceship or something.
They do. But everything else in my studio was black, so I was like, I'll just match it with everything else.
Yeah.
But they do look cool.
Honestly, that's the thing to consider these days as well. If you're going to be streaming things or you're going to be online, you want something that looks. You want your studio to look good as well. So yeah,
100%. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. No, that's been really informative, Danny. So thank you so much for going through that.
Thank you.
With me.
Yeah.
And we do have a couple of audience questions before I let you go. So there was one from Distortion Junkie. So Distortion Junkie asked, do you need to calibrate the speaker to the room? So I know there are a couple of kind of knobs and things at the back of the speaker.
That's right.
So yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, you could go into a massive rabbit hole of calibrating speakers. The good thing is with studio monitors, they have a large. I think 99% of the studio design monitors have been designed to just, plonk in a studio and away you go. They'll sound great. However, not always the case. Now, on the back of some speakers, they'll have, like you say, knobs where you can turn things to sort of cut some frequencies or maybe even boost some frequencies. I know some speakers will even come with some guides to, if you're placing your speaker near a wall, you need to sort of cut some lows or something like that. So you don't need to necessarily calibrate the speaker, but there is options there to help that speaker perform in a way you need it to for mixing. You might do a mix and you might think to yourself, I really can't. I can't hear the bass, or there's too much bass. Where you can go. Most speakers have got a high pass filter where you can sort of toggle between, and that that could just be the answer to a great mix. But there's no need to go into too much detail in calibrating a speaker. Most of it's been done.
Okay, yeah, cool. All right. So no need to overly stress about that one. So that's good to know. And then we have another question from Rose McDowell. So Rose asked, how much do the interface and cables that you use impact the sound from your monitors?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, interface is an entry level interface is going to sound. I say sound. It's going to process the sound a lot differently to a higher end interface, and that's just due to the components, the analog to digital converters. So the way it converts audio into what you see on your screen, what you hear back, the digital sense of it will be a lot smoother and things like that. So yes, it's going to sound slightly better as a result. so there's going to be there is going to be differences. It's not going to be like, look, a difference between a studio monitor and a hi-fi speaker. It's not going to be as clear cut as that, but there is going to be sort of, you're probably going to be, if you really analyze the frequencies and get deep, then yes, it's going to sound slightly different. Cables on the other, I'd say cables is quite an important one. I've definitely made the mistake of using cheap cables in the past, and that's part of learning, I suppose. Cheaper cables can break easily. They can get noisy through static and things like that, where, more, if you're going to, I'd say invest in some decent cables, because they're going to last you. They're going to, you're not going to run the risk of breaking them. They're not going to run the risk of being affected by things that you've got going on in your studio. So cables is a good one to sort of make sure you've don't cut corners is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, all right, cool. No, that's good advice. So thank you again, Danny. I'm sure
pleasure.
loads
Thank
of
you.
people would get a lot from that as a starting point in understanding what they need for their
That's great to hear.
for their studio. Yeah, no worries. So have you got much else on for your day? Are you back to work?
Today, yes, back to work now. So today it's one of those days where we're working from home. So just getting through it, I suppose. And I'm fortunate. I'll be tracking some drums at the weekend. So excited to that one. That'll be at my friend's house. It's a bit of a guerrilla setup where we're just sticking some mics in the room and seeing how we go. So like I say, there's always a way to make these things work. It's always fun.
Exactly. Cool. All right. Well, good to hear. And I will leave you to the rest of your day then.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.